Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining the Economic Development of the Future. Ooh, we have some tips for course correction today. Right now you're hearing Susan Brake. I'm a Vice President of Development Counselors International, one of your speakers today, but I'm definitely not the star, and you'll be hearing from her shortly when I introduce her. But before we begin, I just want to share a few housekeeping notes from IEDC with you all. All of you are currently muted, so if you have any questions or issues with your sound or you can't see our screen, please flag it in the chat button. And then to ask a question of myself or Lisa, feel free to go ahead and type your questions in that little question box. We will have a question and answer, I like to call it a little intermission, after we provide you our tips. So definitely feel free, just as things crop up, put those questions there, and then Lisa and I will tag team those answers. And then after we're finished, within 24 hours of the webinar, we'll send you an evaluation. And if you guys could all just fill that out for us, that would be extremely helpful. As your feedback we incorporate into future presentations, and that again will help us be better, and you will get a link to this presentation at that time. So without further ado, I know you're all dying to hear about this. Let's dive right in, and we'll share with you some tips. But again, before we begin, I want to introduce what I like to call your website peers and seers. And I'm Susan Brake, but again, I mentioned the star of the show is definitely Lisa Corcoran. She is a badass marketing professional, guys. I want you to know that. She works with, I know, badass. She works with the Calgary Economic Development Corporation, and she's been with them for about 6 years. But what I love about Lisa is many things. Probably the fact that she's like a sister from another mister, but also she's always trying to bring innovation to the economic development marketing world. Super smart, super savvy. So I'm very happy to have her on the call with us today. But before we begin, Lisa, I'd love for you to give a little bit about yourself. So Calgary,
sure.
Eh?
Calgary,
tell us a little bit more.
We try not to say that. So I guess one of the first questions we often get, or we start most of our presentations with, is, well, where is Calgary? Because it's a small city in Canada. So we're in Western Canada. We're about an hour from Banff in the Rocky Mountains. Sure, you've all heard of it. And we're the 4th largest city in Canada. We've got about 1.5 million people, and it's a great place to live. If you want to jump forward one. So I work with Calgary Economic Development, as Susan said. So first of all, thank you so much for having me join you today. I'm super excited, and I don't know that I've ever been described as badass before. So that made me chuckle a little bit. Appreciate that. But Calgary Economic Development is the lead economic development organization for our city. As I mentioned, we're about 1.5 million people. And, you know, we look at ourselves as being in the business of prosperity for our citizens, our companies, our whole community, and trying to build that amazing community where people want to live, work, play, go to school, that kind of thing. You know, they say we make Calgary the city of choice in Canada for the world's best entrepreneurs, and we embrace innovation. So everything that we do is, how do we do it better? How do we make step gains in being easier to do business with, being business friendly? How do we help support the talent that's here? How do we help grow and foster the innovation? So that's kind of the world in which I play. Yeah. So we actually have, and I missed one here, Susan. Oh my goodness, I realized that this afternoon. So we've got, I know we're talking about websites for the future. So we actually have 7 websites that we maintain. We've got two main websites are Calgary Economic Development, which is all about our business and investment attraction. It has all of the stats and facts about our community on it. Life in Calgary is more about what's it like to actually be a part of our community. So one of the modes that we have been in for a long, long time, and that flexes up and down a bit, is talent attraction. And so how do we show people what our city is like when they may not have ever even heard of who we are? We've got a couple of landing sites for different campaigns. So bepartoftheenergy.ca is our landing page that we use in Canada. We have a very similar version that we use when we're promoting city outside, you know, in the U.S., and it's called Wish You Were Here, Calgary, and it has a lot of the same information on it, but it's just a little different starting point. So when folks are coming in from the U.S., it's more about, well, what is Calgary and where is it and how many people live there and all that kind of stuff, where BePartofTheEnergy.ca is like, we're starting right with the entrepreneurs and the stories and the things that are going on. And then we've got a couple of program-specific sites. So we own and operate the Calgary Film Center, which is a film and television production studio, shows like Fargo film out of there. We have another website called Careers in Calgary, and so that's trying to help our workforce development programs and give students that are coming into the post-secondary systems a chance to see what kind of career paths they could have. And then the third site, which I forgot to put there, is Startup Calgary, is actually a part of our organization as well. So that's us in a nutshell.
And Lisa, I have a question. Remind me, are you on an open source or proprietary system for your websites?
For our website?
Yeah.
So most of them are built on Squarespace. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, so it's like kind of an open source platform.
Sort of, yeah. I mean, our content pulls from a whole bunch of different places for sure. But you know, my team kind of delivers it, drives the website program, but we are pulling in information from a ton of other places and resources constantly.
Okay, and I guess one question I was looking at this slide, for those folks who have different messages for different people, you know, you have this business and talent attraction, these different landing sites for Canada and the US. What was your strategy for, you know, hey, let's have 7 different sites that we're managing? Do they have like an umbrella site that they all can go to? As you were thinking through that strategy and these different audiences, do you have any insight on that? I was just curious.
Sure. Yeah. So when I started with Calgary Economic Development, we had 2 websites. We had BePartofTheEnergy.ca, which was really our campaign landing site, and then CalgaryEconomicDevelopment.com. And we went through quite a debate about, do we house everything uniquely within our site, or where do we, you know, kind of when do we go and build a separate program site? And with respect to our program sites, I mean, Calgary Film Center is a physical building that operates. There's an operation team that works out of there, and from both an SEO but also a like end user ease of use, it made a lot of sense to have its own site. Careers in Calgary is the same kind of thing. That was a specific program that was funded by a couple of different orders of government, and it, you know, it was a little bit unique where it couldn't be embedded. So that was one kind of decision driver. The other, when we decided to launch Life in Calgary, which was our talent attraction site, we started looking at what people were actually Googling when it came down to like living, right? And so if people are naturally Googling like, what's it like to live in Calgary, or, you know, living in Calgary or life in Calgary, or, you know, where can I find an apartment in Calgary or whatever, from an SEO perspective, that made way more sense. And then also from the robustness of what's on that site. Like there's multi-level navigation in that site, as there is in CalgaryEconomicDevelopment.com. And so we made the decision that to embed one really complex site within another really complex site wasn't going to make for a very good end user experience.
And what I like about this is there are different audiences, so your metrics, what you're reporting back on each of the sites, can be specific to the audience that you're trying to attract. So I think that's a smart strategy. Yeah. All right. So before we hop into the full presentation, I just wanted to give you all a little bit of sense of who I am as well. Again, there's my little headshot, but I'm with a firm called Development Counselors International, and we are an agency that specializes in economic development and tourism marketing. I've been with the firm for about a dozen years, if not more. I think I've started to lose count, but have had the pleasure of really growing and building our digital division and our, you know, bringing innovation and digital experience to the economic development industry. And this is just a sampling of the clients we've worked with on, you know, full website builds, but we also support clients on the full spectrum of digital marketing, from owned in terms of social media management to also paid, where we're helping them with digital advertising. But it's been a cool gig, and I've gotten a really good sense of this 360 degree view of what's working and what's not in economic development. So excited to share with you all what we're learning. Before we hop in, just a couple of things to keep in mind about how important the website is for your business development and marketing efforts. Every 3 years, BCI, we come out with a survey that really looks at what corporate executives, how they're getting information about a place, how they form their perceptions about a place. It's called Winning Strategies. And in this, we really want to know how they're using websites. So one of the questions we typically like to ask really deals with, what is the likelihood that you will visit an economic development organization's website during your next site location search? And it's interesting, over the years, we've seen, in 2002, they weren't really using an economic development's website. They were calling you, they were making those relationships with you. But as the years have gone on, we've seen that they're really using the website. 65% in 2017 said, hey, we're going to the website. And a lot of times they're going to the website first before they go to you. So that's why, from our perspective, it's really important that, you have the right content on your site so that when they come, they don't check you off from being on the short list. So your website, again, is your most important marketing and also business development tool. So I just want to share with you, as we talked a little bit about, 2002 and the past, there are some challenges for the economic development website of the past. And just a couple things. They are generic. If you look at a website of the past, you could basically put anywhere USA on the copy. They don't speak to the place, and they don't speak to the place's value proposition about what makes it different. They're also built, and I went a little too fast, they're also built on outdated frameworks. And I'm going to go back. Sorry, this computer is getting ahead of me. And this will let you know, so this kind of dates me right now, the fact that I pulled Zach Morris in this photo. So you all now know how old I am, or have a right sense of how old I am. But they're built on outdated frameworks. A lot of times we'll see custom proprietary systems, which are fine solutions, but they don't allow for an agility that you can own your site and make tweaks and changes to your site. Another thing is that, these websites of the past are withholding. And I like to say that this one looks like my daughter, where, she doesn't want to come to me when I'm telling her to come. She doesn't want to give me any information that I want. And a lot of times we'll hear economic development groups say, well, we don't want to put the data on the site because we want them to call us. But again, as we saw with that set, you might get bumped off that shortlist quicker if you are withholding with your information. Another thing is they target the wrong audience. When we come in and help clients figure out their navigation and how they want to be set up, we hear a lot of, oh, well, we need to make sure our local stakeholders are the first and foremost person we're targeting, which if they're the ones, from a business and retention point, absolutely, that's critical. But if your website, if you're saying you want to target corporate executives, you need to make sure you're targeting the right audience with the right content. And then kind of finally, this last website of the past is that they report vanity metrics. So they're really only reporting, oh, we've had this many users come through, and there's no analysis of what's happening on the site. So we see this a lot from economic development groups, that they're just withholding, a little bit ugly. They don't even say the story of the place, and really aren't showing you in the best light. So I kind of wanted to do a little check-in with our group of y'all here. We have a quick poll that we would love to do that asks the question, how does your website stack up? So you have 3 different choices. you know, oh my God, all of these describe our website. Maybe one or two describe us, or, you know, you're the third one. Totally perfect, light years ahead. And if you feel like you're the totally perfect, light years ahead one, you know, thank you for being on this call still. So we're getting responses in still. Lisa and I can see this in real time. Unfortunately, you guys can't. So we'll see how this works.
So, Susan, do you mind if we had a question come in? Do you mind if I quickly address that while we're waiting?
Yeah, do it. Smart.
So the question came in asking about how, with that many sites that we have in Calgary, how big is our staff that actually manages that? So my team has 1.2 full-time equivalents that are digital managers. So I've got two incredibly talented people that each work 3 days a week on it. We supplement that with a summer intern, and then we have a digital agency that we work with on some of the bigger things. So my two digital people that are each working 3 days a week, one of them is really focused on our social and content distribution, and the other one's really focused on the actual site itself and our visual brand identity. So it's not a huge, crazy massive team.
Yeah, you guys are tiny but mighty, right? It's pretty amazing.
We sure try. Yeah, I mean, it's being resourceful, right? Like it's about trying to figure out where can we pull content from that we're not creating, and you know, how can we get the biggest bang for our buck?
Yeah. So here's a look at the poll results for all of those. You know, about 85% of you are in that all five or one or two describe us, and then the dudes who are light years ahead, you 14%, you guys are amazing. Send me your name afterwards, and we'll use you guys. We'll add you to our links of websites to look at and be inspired by. So let's see if I can go on. All right. So now let's kind of talk about, you know, for those in the 85%, well, what are some things you can look at to bring your website into the future? And just as we start out thinking, basically one of the tips I give to folks is make sure your website includes the basics. And I know that's not forward thinking. So at first I was like, do I include this? But yeah, you have to include the basics. So again, from that winning strategy survey that we send out, we find that corporate executives and site selectors, they value certain information on the website. They want to know about incentives, demographics, your buildings that you have, workforce stats, comparisons if you can give them, major employers. I often see that that's something that's overlooked in terms of content. Quality of life is, you know, starting to become more and more important than it was even when I started at DCI 12 years ago. And that ties back into what Lisa was saying related to talent and the importance of talent attraction. And then contact information, that's not on here, but making sure that you're easily found and accessible to these folks is still important. They're still going to give you a call. So again, let's start with the basics. But the websites of the future, they're also specific, and we have a couple of examples about what we mean. So again, it's not just Anywhere USA. They're saying, hey, this is who we are. This is what our story is. But hey, you might be somebody who's here for local interest or information, or you might be someone who's here for expansion. So they really get specific in their targeting. And you saw what Lisa's team did in terms of getting really specific and, you know, having different sites for different audiences. And we're seeing that across the industry. I wanted to share with you, again, a couple examples as you're looking for inspiration of your own. The one on the left is from the Asheville Chamber of Commerce and Economic Development Group. And again, we're seeing more and more economic development groups and Chamber of Commerces merging, but the audiences have different needs. So here at Asheville, they specifically help people what we like to call self-select. I'm here to look to expand or relocate my business, or I want to get involved with what's happening in the community. Another North Carolina example that I have is Charlotte's Backyard. This is a talent attraction site. And as they were thinking about their marketing and their website, they said, we're not going to market or find talent from across the US. We just really want to attract manufacturing talent from Charlotte. So they even use that in their branding, where they just called it out like, hey, we are right in your backyard. Come work with us. Here's an example, Lisa. I thought it was really cool. I know you've given us a couple of your websites, but the paid campaign that you did related to logistics, I'd love to hear just a little bit more about that.
Yeah, we did it, and Susan's team helped us with it, but we did a paid campaign targeted to distribution centers because we have, that's kind of been identified as a significant area of growth opportunity for us. And so this actually wasn't a standalone site. It was a landing page that was, embedded within CalgaryEconomicDevelopment.com, but it was, it had a very distinct look and feel. So it was very, like, you only got to it from the campaign itself. And, and we really felt like rather than kind of muddling the message and trying to have somebody figure out like, okay, I've got to find transportation logistics on your website and I've got to go find all this information. How about if we just present, on this one campaign, everything related to distribution centers and transportation logistics in Calgary in the area on one landing page and make it really easy for that end user to kind of self-navigate through it.
And what was cool about that, Lisa, didn't you guys, you targeted people by their industry, but you had what, 40 kind of request to meetings? I forget the exact number, but you got 4 strong leads from this very targeted campaign, correct?
Yes. Yeah, we did. Okay. And we're working with those companies now, which is awesome. And so I really look at it and I go, I would way rather have a small number of awesome and amazing leads that our business development team can work through and support than have, a ton of leads that now we've got to go figure out which ones are actually the really good ones.
Yeah. So the benefit to being specific is that you have quality over quantity, which is great.
Yeah.
And that, I love it. Another thing we're seeing is that, they're on the back end, they're finding which specific companies are actually coming to their site. And there's some software out there. There are various platforms that you can use this sort of IP tracking that lets you know, oh, this company from this certain IP address was on your site. Here are the pages they were visiting. You can start to see when there's gold behavior happening. So this is an example of a company that had come on a client site. You see up here which the company is. You see it's Apple. You see, oh, they were looking at our data centers. They came back and they spent a lot of time on our 50-state comparison. You can look again and see, oh, it's got a little bit more insight on the company. And then what was crazy is that it was Iowa that was looking on the back end of their site, and they saw, oh, Apple's pretty active on our site. They're looking at our data center stuff. Let's reach out directly to the data center contact and let them know, like, hey, do you need more information about data centers in Iowa? And that's what they did. Their business development team went ahead and reached out to Apple, and then Apple set up a data center in Iowa. Now, would they have done that regardless? Maybe, but the fact is that Iowa could be very specific with their targeting, with their message to Apple to say, hey, we know you're not going to set up a tech center here, but what about you're interested in data centers and why Iowa is good for data centers? So it's a really good tool. Being specific lets you target, lets your marketing team work really well with your business development team. So I think that's a really great thing for the future. This is kind of a personal, maybe a personal crusade of mine, is to bring data to life. A lot of times we'll see data on economic development websites. I mean, data, everybody's like, it's boring. Data's data. You can't bring it to life. You can't make it sexy. But you can. There's definitely ways that you can make sure it's on brand, that it's responsive, that it fits within your site instead of looking like it's this like wonky contraption. And we have a couple of examples of people we think that do data really well. But when you're looking at data on your site, we get a lot of questions of, well, we don't really want to put too much data out there, but really the thing is that we recommend is that you want to focus on sort of these core data statistics. So it's about labor, it's demographics, what's happening in your industries by workforce, your major employers, GDP, and then even data where you rank really well. And it can't be a ranking from 2009. It has to be a relevant and recent ranking. So we have found that that works really well in the industry. And if you're looking for inspiration on data, the Columbus region has a very unique data program in terms of all of this data basically lives on an Excel sheet on the back end of their website. And they're able to just, upload the Excel chart if they have a change to the data, and then it uploads throughout their entire site. But it's tables that are responsive. You can see they're on brand. And, it's a little bit of graphs as well. And my controls are getting ahead of me. Another cool way to showcase data, I know, so excited. This program is so excited to show you data. Another cool one to check out is how Intersect Illinois does their data. And you'll see here, this is the desktop experience, but what this site is really built for is mobile. So I encourage you to look at this site on a mobile experience, because what you'll be able to do is scroll with it through your finger, which that's really cool. That's a great way to use data. All of this data is downloadable. They have a really interesting, as you click on it, you can see by select occupation. And then I like how they do their news. So they make their news an interactive timeline that shows you across the industries what's happening. So a lot of those I just showed you were charts and graphs. Here's how Colorado does it. Colorado has a very strong and well-known brand in terms of, hey, we're a great place to live, because everybody goes rock climbing or climbs up mountains of ice, which, by the way, I live in Colorado and I do not do that. But I definitely enjoy Colorado's quality of life. So they wanted to bring their data to life through visuals, and this is just one way you can do it. And all of these examples live on the website. Lisa's example is with kind of a GIS platform, right, Lisa?
Yeah, so we actually used to do what Columbus did, where we had a spreadsheet in the back end that we have a research analyst that would go in every single month, and she would update the data and reproduce the spreadsheet or the charts and whatnot, and those would all get uploaded. And I got to be honest, it was a lot of work. And so we started looking at how could we automate that and make it a bit more efficient. And there was a company called Local Intel that was launching around that same time. There's a handful of these companies out there that are basically saying, hey, we're going to take all of the publicly available information, and we've created almost like a landing page for your community. And we went, well, that's awesome, except that it's taking people from our site to yours, and there's not really a neat and tidy way to get them back if they've got more industry information. And so we worked with Local Intel to create some widgets that we could put in our site. So all of our primary economic indicators, so like employment data, education data, economic data, like our typical stats can information, all gets put onto these charts that basically are embedded within our site. So it's awesome in that we're no longer having to update any of the tables in the back end. It's responsive, where doesn't matter what device somebody's looking at it on, they can see it all. It just stacks a little bit differently. And so for us, that's been a really good solution, in that it's freed up a lot of time every single month from this one person going in and doing all the manual updates.
Yeah, we couldn't show you exactly how it looked, but I would encourage, again, all of you to go to these sites. And I did have a question if we would be sending this PowerPoint afterwards, and we will. So don't feel like you have to write notes like a mad person trying to take down all of the amazing things Lisa's saying, but we will send this, so you are good to go there. Lisa, anything else you wanted to add about data? I think this kind of showcases your available properties. And does that tool pull your available properties as well, or do you have to go with another firm for that?
Yeah, so actually on this particular page, as you scroll down our economic indicators page, if somebody wanted to get a whole bunch more information and dive really deep into something around the business climate, these buttons actually link out to the local Intel site, which then has it sliced and diced in 27 different ways. But we thought for the basic things that people were looking for and like our most commonly accessed data points, we really felt it was important to have them integrated into our site. But if, like I say, if a site selector is doing a really deep dive, then, these buttons get them out to the local Intel site where they can get that information quite easily.
Yeah. And I guess one of the questions, Lisa, does local Intel then send you a report of like how long people have been on, if there was somebody that was on the available properties for a long time, are you able to track those metrics at all, or you just kind of track outbound links from your personal end?
This is terrible. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know.
That's not terrible. That's not terrible at all. That's just kind of, again, Lisa and I were talking earlier, guys. We're a little bit of data geeks, and we kind of go down the rabbit hole. So I was just curious. So being a little Alice in Wonderland there. For those of you who are looking at talent attraction sites, I'd really encourage you to look at how Choose Atlanta does data about living in Atlanta. This is just an example of one of their neighborhoods. And again, you see that it's, they use infographics, short, quick, 30 minutes to the city. It's a 33 score in walkability. So starts to paint a picture without being bogged down in text. I also like Choose Atlanta. They have a very interactive data tool that works really well, where you say what your current salary is, and then it pops out a number of how much further your salary will go in Atlanta. Again, play around on their site when you get a chance. They have a great neighborhood functionality. I think it's a little bit hard to find, but once you find it, it's just really cool how it drives you down whichever path you want to go. And then also their cost of living calculator is interesting as well from a talent perspective. So that's a look at data. Again, I like data. Lisa and I are little data geeks, but feel free to play around on your own and find what you like as well. But basically, data doesn't have to be boring, and neither does your place. Your place doesn't have to be boring. And Lisa, I think you have some good thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because if you can go to the next slide for us, Susan.
Okay. Yeah.
So let's talk about the data points, because I think that they do help tell a really important story. But okay, so spoiler alert, this is actually my city. But so we're 1.5 million people. Average age, or median age is 38 in a bit. Almost 7% GDP growth last year, planning to slow to about 2.5% this year. We've got a relatively high unemployment rate. We've got this huge downtown vacancy issue. But if I had just given you those stats, this could be a number of cities, right? It doesn't necessarily tell the full story. And so one of the things that we've really tried to take an approach with is the storytelling and kind of filling in the blanks and providing a whole bunch more context. And so one of my digital managers, she launched a content plan, full-on content plan for us about 3 years ago, which was, I got to be honest, it was new back then to us, and it was a little bit scary for our senior management team for sure. But we have a newsroom that gets updated every couple of days, and with kind of filling in the gaps. And so the things that you don't know about Calgary, if you want to advance to the next slide, Susan. Calgary is the fourth most livable city in the world. It's actually the most, the Economist Intelligence Unit says it's the most livable city in North America. We've got a growing innovation ecosystem. We've, our industries, while it's been very traditionally based on energy, we've actually got a ton of clean tech going on that's being rolled out around the world. Our ag sector, our pulses, so like lentils and beans and things like that, and our pork get shipped out to Italy and come back to us as prosciutto and pasta. And we've got a growing film and television sector. And we've got, one of, the first out of line of sight autonomous systems testing facility in Canada, which the people that work in TNL tell me that's actually very, very important. But you know what I mean? So there's a lot of context that needs to be tied into your story. And I think there's some interesting ways that you can do that. So it's not just about, that 400-word story on a blog site, or it's not just about an industry page on your website, but how are you telling that with the visuals? How do you tie that all together to to really showcase your city and bring the personality alive. And we've tried really hard to make sure that we're getting a great, consistent use of the Calgary voice, which for us is, very friendly and very casual and hopefully engaging. I mean, as marketers, you all might look at it and go, oh my God, totally not, but let me know. That's your thing. There's a question in the thing about what happens if your data set isn't great compared to other jurisdictions. And I got to be honest, we've got some spots like that. So 27 million square feet makes it seem of available office space. So by comparison, that is, 27% is about 10 million square feet in our city, which is about the size of downtown Vancouver, which is, a fairly significant city in Canada. That looks a little scary to some people, right? So, but it's also the truth and it's also the fact. So what we tend to focus on is that, yes, we have a lot of available office space. There was a downturn in the energy industry a few years ago. But we've got this great young talent. We've got this great livable city. We've had, relatively high unemployment for the last couple of years, and people aren't leaving to go somewhere else. They want to stay with their city. So what we try to do is figure out where are the stories we can kind of fill in around those data points that may not be fantastic compared to other places, and just, and really try to play off of our strengths.
Yeah, I think, Lisa, that's a good point. And telling the story, it's funny, we're in the business of marketing places, guys. You work for a city, you work for a region, you work for a state, you work for a metro area. We don't, like when I came to work for DCI, came from Procter & Gamble. So I was selling like Tide, Downy, and Clorox to hotels. And I could still make a case for that, but I was like, that is so boring. And we're actually telling a story of a city, and people choose to live in a city. They choose to do business in a region. There's an emotional tie to where you live and where you grow up. So why are we so hesitant to tell that story in our marketing and on our website? We should be singing it from the rooftops. And I love how Lisa gave you all, focus on your pillars that are your story, but also find your brand voice. A lot of times we'll come into a client community and we just hear how they talk, and that's how you start to write the copy of the website. So instead of, it's feeling a little just like Anywhere USA, like me writing a brochure for a college entry, it's somebody who's living there and working there and bringing that voice to life is really critical. So I think this is a great tie-in, when you have the city story or the region stories in addition to the data, that really sells your place as well. So that's another little pet passion of mine, I guess I would say. Another thing about the city or the website of the future is they use what's called geo-targeting. And this not every website will benefit from this, but going back to that sort of specific conversation that we were having, geo-targeting basically lets you custom tailor your content for your visitors by their location. So where Lisa has two websites right now, one that targets Canada with a specific message and then one that targets US, geo-targeting will let you combine both of those websites under one, and the US content that you are served if you're coming from the US is different than what would happen if you're coming from Canada. And again, this is really good if you have a strong FDI, if you're looking to target international companies. You can target the success stories. If it's a German company and you have something on your homepage about success stories, there would be an opportunity to serve up a German company instead of a US company. So the experience starts to feel more unique and specialized to this person. So here's an example of how Colorado does it. Colorado has a very different message for their in-state partners versus the East Coast versus the West Coast versus international. So in-state, these guys just want to know, hey, what's going on in my region? How can I get more funding? What programs do you have supporting me? And that's the experience that's served up when you come from in-state. Now, East Coast, West Coast, international, they all have different message. For instance, when Colorado surveyed corporate executives on the East Coast, they thought that the workforce was just a bunch of pot smokers, which again is not true, but that was sort of this perception on the East Coast that Colorado wanted to address. On the West Coast, they were like, we don't care that you guys have legalized pot, that's cool with us, but are you as techy and savvy as we are? And then international was like, we don't even know where Colorado is, it's somewhere in this area. So Colorado was very specific with their messaging and how, when someone came from a different location, whether they were East Coast, West Coast, international, they were served a different message. And you can view what their different messages are. I don't think we're as blatant on the East Coast one to say, trust us, we're not a bunch of pot smokers, we're hard workers, here's why, you know, I think we focused on the smarts of the Colorado workforce instead of the legalization of pot. But that's just a thing we're seeing in terms of really being specific and targeting your message. And then kind of this last tip is one that's, I don't have anything specific really to share with you, but basically if you have a website, it's not just about putting your website up and hoping it just stays relevant and that it will be great. A lot of times we'll see that these websites need to adapt for the future. And just even an example is something as basic as making sure your website's responsive. And a lot of times I see on economic development sites, your traffic, people are like, well, I only have 20% of my traffic coming from mobile. Why does my website have to be mobile? And the thing is, I'm like, I totally see your point. That's totally valid. However, Google is starting to rank mobile sites more than your desktop sites. So in a way, you have to stay relevant in the eyes of Google as well as in the eyes of your key audience. So making sure your site's responsive. Another thing is if you have a large international presence that you're trying to target, we do recommend that you look into the GDPR, which is the European guidelines. So just being aware of what's going on out in the World Wide Web. Those are two examples of kind of the next and best practices. Other best practices that, you know, Google might ding you for, or the European Union might ding you for. Your fonts. You might think that you have a really cool font for your brand that you've used in your marketing or your collateral, but actually Google has some fonts that they rank higher than others. So just being aware of those sorts of things are pretty critical. So I wanted to take, and then I guess this last one, sorry, the most important one, and Lisa has some really great insight on this, but I think metrics. Metrics are really important, and as we talked about in the beginning, these vanity metrics, just reporting your numbers of users aren't going to do anything. And Lisa, I love this dashboard you guys have created, and I don't know if you want to share some insight on it.
Yeah, I mean, so this is a dashboard that was from a specific video project that we launched last spring. But can we just to go back on the metrics thing, I think that the really important thing on your metrics is you need to ask yourself, what is it that your website is doing for you? Like, what role is it playing? Because I would say, like, ours has really transitioned in the last year from being, it's all about awareness of Calgary. We just want people to know about us, to, okay, how are we collecting leads off of it? How do we know if we're moving somebody through our funnel? Like, what's that conversion point? And so determining what you're measuring on your site is really should be driven by your goals and understanding what's the question you want to ask and how is that comparing to, you know, whatever that period is or whatever you were expecting it is. And you know, you hear the saying a lot about, like, you know, what gets measured gets focused on, right? And so we really look at our overall site metrics, but we're also looking at, like, how much time or, you know, what's the path people are taking once they're on our site? What are they doing once they're there? Are they, you know, at what point are they converting into something? And then now we're kind of going, okay, well, it looks like some of the data is telling us that maybe people are looking for questions. And so we're trying to figure out, like, should we be putting a chat bot onto our site to try to help deal with some of those questions? So it's kind of helping to drive some decisions going forward for us. But going back to that dashboard, so we had a campaign that we launched last spring that was around just, Canada, let's talk about energy, right? There's a small pipeline conversation going on in Canada right now. And, there's a lot of very strong opinions on it, but sometimes those opinions aren't necessarily formed on a lot of facts. So we're just trying to say, hey, let's actually have a conversation that's based on facts. And so we launched this video, and we had a small budget around the promotion on it. And so what this particular dashboard allows us to look at is, well, where are the people seeing it? Who is it that's seeing it? Where are they getting it from? Which channels are performing better? And it's quite funny because when we talked about how we were going to promote it, we actually thought LinkedIn was going to be an amazing paid source for us, because it is on a lot of our other campaigns, like on our business and investment attraction campaigns. LinkedIn is by far our #1 best quality source of leads. And so when we actually put this video into LinkedIn, because the content and the context was a little bit different, it was an awareness piece about a controversial issue. LinkedIn actually isn't where we were getting the engagement from at all. It was mostly Twitter and Facebook. And so what it allowed us to do very, very quickly was redeploy that spend so that it was going into the markets and the places where people were actually engaging. We were getting, kind of the conversation started that we wanted to. So we do this similar kind of thing for pretty much every single campaign we run. And then we've got a similar version for our overall site, just to kind of see how they all roll up. And, and those metrics may not be like a top line dashboard, like a top line report card kind of thing that we're looking at, but it's certainly inputs to, okay, is our marketing working? Are we getting people to our site? Are they doing what we want them to do? And it's sort of one of, and it sort of helps to figure out long-term what we should be focusing on.
Yeah. And Lisa, it looks like you're probably using Google Data Studio to help create this dashboard, which is a great free platform.
Yeah. So and I'll be totally clear. I think Chelsea made this for us.
Yeah.
I'll be honest. I don't have those skills whatsoever. But yeah, my team certainly was using the Google Studio.
Yeah. So for those who are listening, Google Data Studio, you can incorporate your Google Analytics. If you're doing paid, you can incorporate all of that into one dashboard, and it's a free tool for you to use. It just does take a little bit of finagling and maybe some patience. So, or Chelsea, is that who you have? Is that who you said you have, Lisa, as a Chelsea on staff helping with that? But yeah. And Lisa, I have a question. For this dashboard, did you use it to showcase to your leadership, or was it more for you as the VP of marketing to make decisions quickly? Who did you share this with?
This was very much used on our team. So as mentioned, Chelsea pulled it. We sat down with our Marcom manager who was running the campaign, and kind of walked through, like, okay, here's this is what we thought was going to happen. Here's what's actually happening. Now what do we do with it, right? So it's very much used within our marketing team. It's not something I would ever show to our leadership team.
Okay, got it. Thanks for
and part of it, like to be honest, part of it is that they don't necessarily know what it is they're looking at. Like it looks lovely and it's whatever, but it certainly helps inform the narrative that goes back to them. Like, hey, here's how that particular video campaign is performing. Here's what we thought was going to happen. We're making some tweaks so that we get the intended results we want. But no, we don't tend to show this kind of dashboard to our CEO or anything.
Okay. Cool. So great. So what I'd like to do now, we have kind of, I want to take a little bit of break and answer any questions or answer any questions that have come through. We do have a variety, so feel free to start asking more questions. We have some time, and then we'll head in to give you guys some examples of websites of the future that you can look at as you do your research. And then Lisa has some great tips on working with website firms. So, I think that's a very important thing as you guys think about your own website, what you want to look for in a partner. So let's see, any questions that have come out, Lisa, that you saw as we were going through? There's one that I think, here, I'll do this latest one that just came through. Have you encountered issues with persons affected by sight disabilities taking legal action against public economic development agencies to make certain information posted to EDO's websites readable? If so, what steps can be taken to make sure these groups can access information posted to an EDO website? So we make sure all of our websites are ADA compliant, which helps with that. The site disabilities, that's one of the things that, you know, should be on as we think about the basics. Lisa, I don't know if you've had any, are you guys public at your group? No, but most, yeah, I mean, yeah, like most public sites have to be ADA compliant. So yeah. I'm not sure if your site's not. I would say just talk to your web developer about how to make sure that your site is compliant. I don't know the exact steps needed, but it's ADA compliance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would say that was just sort of table, like when we went through our project to redevelop our main site, but also whenever we've done anything else, there's sort of some things that are, you know, have to be accounted for, and that's, you know, it's just kind of one of them.
Yeah. Lisa, you kind of mentioned, somebody was curious about your staffing. You talked a little bit about, hey, we have 2 people, but talk about how you fill that content pipeline.
Yeah, so I do have a communications person who kind of doubles as our content manager. And so she really builds out our editorial calendar of here's all the things that we're going to be doing and talking to and kind of sourcing the content for. But what we've done is we've created almost a brand guideline book on how do you write. So typically when you have a brand guideline book, or, you know, in a lot of other organizations, it's like, oh, here's how to use a logo and here's the kind of pictures we're going to use and these are our colors. We've taken it a step further and said, look, this is how you actually talk about our city. This is, you know, this is how we write about our city. These are the kinds of things we would say. You know, this is our tone and our voice. And actually what's interesting is that particular document is shared by ourselves and tourism and our convention center and a handful of other promotional agencies, just to make sure that, you know, if somebody finds a piece of content about Calgary, whether it comes from us or from, you know, another one of the promotional groups, that it doesn't sound like we're talking about 2 different cities. Because that, you know, that certainly can happen where everybody's in silos. So it's more of a style guide on how to write. So going back to my communications person, she actually reviews everything that goes on the site. She may tweak it a little bit, but doesn't, you know, I wouldn't say that she does deep dives on a lot of it. Much. I have a marketing programs manager who is, you know, she writes content for our website as well. She's a very broad-based, versatile marketer where she's quite capable of writing. And so that's part of why we don't have everything run through a single copywriter, but Kristen does monitor what's being posted just to make sure that we're talking about Calgary the way we want to.
And do they have access to your CMS? Or are you using some sort of other, you know, I think like Gather Content is one where you can, people can upload the content that they want to approve. How are you vetting? How is she approving it? Are they just sending her a Word document?
Yeah. So no, the folks are actually uploading it right to CMS. So what we've tried to do is make sure that everybody's got basic skills on the team to be able to go into the CMS, be able to upload content on a page. If it's a really quick fix, like we're adding a sentence or here and there, you know, they go ahead and they do that themselves, and Kristen kind of goes back and checks it later. But if it's if it's an article or if it's a news sector page or anything like that, all of that's being, you know, kind of edited on the fly within the CMS as needed.
Yeah. Let's see. That's a good one. Lisa, how do you prioritize, like with a limited budget? How do you say, this is what I'm going to focus on my website?
Oh, holy, that is the question of the year. So we're going through our 2019 planning right now, and that's actually a conversation that we're having at kind of at our team meetings is, okay, so looking ahead at the next year, where do we see our website going? Where do we, are there things that are deficient that we need to deal with? What are the projects that are kind of on our wish list, in addition to our regular, maintenance and enhancements that we can foresee? And so we have a bit of a conversation from a team perspective saying, okay, this would be a really nice to have. Does it enhance the user experience? Does it create some efficiency somewhere else? Like what's the rationale? And we make those decisions as a group. I would say that probably about 25% of our overall marketing spend a year is spent on digital. So a combination of our websites and creation of assets. And we try to take out about 10% of that and experimental isn't a word that often people are comfortable with, but we try to look at like what are new technologies or what are new things that we should be testing and trying and you know, and using, right? So we tried a very awesome content manager the year before last and went, oh my gosh, that has way too much power for what we need, right? We're only using a handful of the services, probably not a spend we're going to continue. However, it has shown us that we do need to have, you know, a tool that helps us distribute our content wider. And so let's look at kind of what another lower cost option might be that doesn't maybe have quite as many bells and whistles, but is really effective for what we need. But that's generally how our process goes.
And so will you repeat, Lisa, I think that was an important point. How much of your budget do you allocate for the digital marketing again of your full budget?
It's about a quarter of our full budget goes to digital marketing. And then about 10% of that, so about 2.5% of our overall budget is used for new, like, you know, innovations within marketing, right? Yep. So things that we haven't done before that we want to kind of dip our toe into and see how they work, or see, you know, does it help us amplify what we're doing? Does it help us, does it make us more effective in our lead generation? Does it make us a better broadcaster? Does it give us access to better content? That kind of thing.
Yeah, and then I think this is kind of an interesting follow-up question. What is the average ballpark for a full website redesign?
Wow, that's like how long is a piece of string, right?
I know. So I think it depends on the size of your community, because your community can tolerate as much as you have. For our industry, on average, I'm seeing that people are able, comfortable cost for most size communities, and again, it's this string ranges from probably 50,000. Now, are you gonna get a custom experience? Are you gonna have to do a lot of the writing? Those are sorts of questions you can ask. For the more innovative programs and websites, those can shoot for the moon in terms of cost. But again, it depends on the size of your community and what budget you can tolerate. There are developers out there who can make websites on the cheap. You can be creative with it, but then it's how much work will that put back on your team is the other question. I don't know, Lisa, what was for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, we've had sites that have been kind of the order of magnitude of like under 10,000, and we've had sites that have been way, 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 way higher than that, depending on what we want them to do. So I think the biggest thing that we look at is, you know, what's the end result we need? What's the criteria that we're comfortable with as far as like how much work am I going to do? How much writing are we going to do? How much, like, are we uploading our own photos and uploading our own text? Which we've done before, right? Like we've said, look, this is our absolute budget. What I would say is, you know, when you find a vendor that you go, this is a great vendor that we can work with, right? Like they have a shared vision with us. They buy into what it is we're doing. They're willing to work with us. Have a really honest conversation with them about, okay, so if my budget is, you know, $15,000 or $50,000 or $100,000, you know, here's how much work I'm willing to put into it and how much work I'm not. And so I think that, you know, when you're evaluating different proposals, in, you need to be really need to pull out of those what's being delivered, right? What's being delivered to you by the vendor, and making sure you're comfortable with that price point.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Lisa, because I think what's underestimated a lot of times, what I see when we're working with clients is just how much time it takes to pull together content, that includes writing, if you're having to write all new website pages, and also having, you know, to source all the imagery. That can take, you know, on our end, when we do that for clients, that takes our team over the course of 2 months around 100 to 120 hours. So as you're thinking of your own time, it's like, oh God, how do I have that much time? So that's a great point, Lisa. And Lisa has some tips again for those of you who are going through a website redesign. what you should look for in a vendor that we'll go through with you in a second. Someone was asking about, so we were talking a little bit about different content management systems people are on. Someone was asking WordPress. Do you know if other cities are using it? And I'll just let you know that DCI, we build all of our sites on WordPress for the most part. We're looking at Drupal a little bit for those more public entities, but WordPress is safe and secure, and we haven't had any issues on any of the sites that we've built. And we use a custom developer instead of, sometimes you'll see WordPress sites in our industry that are just using kind of a Premier template, and you can tell it's a template. It doesn't necessarily fit with your different needs, but WordPress is a great site. And I don't know if you have any experience on WordPress, Lisa, that you might want to share.
Yeah, we've got one of our sites is built on WordPress, and part of it was, you know, I mean, it was intended to be a cheap and cheerful kind of, let's get it up and let's get going, but also because our digital team had experience in it. So that was, you know, it's been great for what that particular site needed to do, and you know, we can be updating it ourselves. We have another site, I think, that we originally looked at doing it on Wix and opted not to, and so we are actually using Silverstripe on the back end of the rest of our sites right now. We have used Drupal in the past, and what I found was that it was for us, it was very complex for non-technical people, right? Yeah. So, you know, so that was kind of where we have shied away from that going forward, just because I do want everybody to have access to it and be able to be a little bit self-sufficient and resourceful on making the updates they need to make.
Yeah. And then, Lisa, will you share with the group again the name of the data platform you guys are using?
Oh, yeah, we're using Local Intel. So it's awesome because they happen to be a small Alberta startup, right? Mm-hmm. Like they're in our backyard, and we were happy to support them.
And I was going to say we build custom. We use a technology that just builds it directly on the back end of the CMS, but Local Intel is similar to probably the other the data analysis platforms out there, like GIS SwepTech, I think Location One. I think all of those. There's definitely a variety of different platforms out there for integrating data on your site, and it's a lot of those that are third party. Just the data is uploaded from the tech tool directly.
Yeah. Now there's a question here as well about that our websites look a bit like they could be tourism, and I'll be honest with you, that's totally by design. So we do have a separate tourism organization in Calgary, but when we've been in the business of talent attraction, so trying to get people to come to our city for specific jobs, they really need to get a sense of what it's like living in our city. And so we tend to sell the livability assets as much as we sell the economy and the business community. So for us, that's a very purposeful move because, you know, when you're trying to bring someone in from Seattle or from San Francisco or Denver or Vancouver or Toronto, London or whatever, they really want a sense of, like, you know, what are they going to be doing, and does it look like a place that they could see themselves living?
Yeah, and we're seeing that tourism and economic development groups are really joining together from a talent marketing perspective, and that ties in with what Lisa's seeing as well. Lisa, I was also curious, your brand standards that you shared that are across the different, you know, from the tourism group, from your group, how did you guys all agree on that? Who was the one that said, guys, we should be using the same voice and standard? How did that come about? I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, so we have a brand committee that was formed probably about 7 years ago now that has representatives from all of the promotional organizations. So cultural and arts, tourism, sport, meetings and conventions, tourism and economic development. And, you know, it was interesting because when you they would come together and they would talk about, like, oh, here's the campaigns we're running, or here's the things we're doing, or these are our big projects we have on the go. And you would put all of these assets side by side, and it didn't even look like they were talking about the same community. Right. And so you could have tourism in Toronto one week and have economic development go in the next week, and there wasn't anything that even linked them together. So that group got together and went, hold on, we need to come together under one visual brand identity. We need to have one kind of common brand story and language set. And we really need to make sure we're all telling the same story. It might be a different flavor of it, like we would speak to economy versus, come stay in a hotel and have this great experience at Calgary Stampede or whatever. But how do we make sure that we're all kind of amplifying that together? And so in about 2012, they rolled out a common brand for the community as a promotion. And then the city actually adopted that 2 years ago, which is amazing and awesome. And so it's great because it means, if my campaigns have turned off and tourism has turned on, Calgary's still being promoted in other communities. So it's been awesome. Like I can't say enough how nice it is having everybody kind of working off of the same song sheet. So we're going through a bit of a refresh right now as far as being able to say, okay, so this is what our community is and who we are, but how do we dive deeper into that to make sure that we're really connecting with our end user audiences.
And do your, I guess the question I have, do your tourism counterparts feel the same way? Because I hear that a lot where they're like, it definitely behooves us in economic development. And I'm starting to see more tourism organizations, but do your tourism folks say the same thing that you guys say?
Yeah, they do. They do. So that brand committee is co-chaired by economic development and by tourism. And so we're, it's probably like every single day that we're somehow talking with, collaborating with, connected to our tourism counterparts. That it's very rare that something would ever go into market that we haven't seen, we haven't heard about, we haven't, and we'll actually be quite purposeful in timing our campaigns around theirs as opposed to, us blitzing a market at the exact same time. If they're going to be in market, I'll delay a campaign going to that market for, 10 days so that they can get out and we're not, jumping on top of one another.
Okay, cool. Well, I think the question, did you have another question, Lisa, you wanted to?
Yeah, there was another question about if economic development in a city should have separate websites. And from my perspective, I would say 100% absolutely yes. And part of it is that your city website, well, it's really important that they have information about, kind of about the community and what's going on from a business perspective, that they link back to that economic development site. Because I would say that your city's website has a whole bunch of things on it that are really important to your community people that live there, right? Like, who do I call about bylaw? How do I get a building permit? What are those things that you need living in a community versus that economic development of, I'm somebody looking to come into a community. Well, the folks that live there may not, they might see some of the stuff that we would have on our economic development sites, like these are our key industries and here's how much our GDP is, and that person living in a community might go, I don't really care, I just want to, figure out how to contact bylaw. So from my perspective, I would 100% absolutely keep them separate, and your economic development site is a promotional site. Your city site is a very utilitarian site.
Awesome. So guys, we have a few more minutes. We'll be respectful of everybody's time, but wanted to share with you all, again, you'll get these slides. As you're looking at inspiration, again, those 14% that were already doing the website of the future, send me who you are and what you're doing, and I'll add you to this slide. But here are just a few, and Lisa, I'm sorry, I don't even have Calgary. That's how much I suck right now. I'll add Calgary, but Lisa has been amazing. And she does want to share with you all, I think, Lisa, this is really good for us kind of to, as we look to wrap up, some tips for finding a website partner. So I think a lot of people are coming into their 2019 planning. Maybe you have a website refresh on your mind. And Lisa has some really good tips. And I know you already shared some of them, but I think this is valuable to go through.
Yeah, I mean, I would, like, with any project that we work on within the marketing world, I always start with what do I want my end to be? What's that, when I look 3 months down the road or 5 months down the road, what do I want to have had happen, and what are the results that I need it to drive? And so when it comes to your website, I look at it as two ways. Like I look at our websites and say they all serve very different purposes, but what's my business objective? Is it I'm providing information about my community? I'm actually collecting lead gens. I'm a distribution center, right? Or I'm a hub for like sending out to other resources with my community, but I would start with that. I think you also need to know what success looks like. So you launch your new site and, 5,000 people come to it or 20,000 people come to it. Like, what's your metric for happy, right? How do you know that it's doing what you want it to do? I would also, kind of do that, have that conversation about how much work do you want to do. So when you're selecting your vendor, I would talk to them about, like, what's their approach? What does their project plan look like? Does it start with a discovery and they kind of want to go through and do an audit of what you've been doing and why and how has your business changed since your last refresh? Or are they like, okay, awesome, we're going to start, here's what it's going to look like, right? Like how involved do you want to be and how involved do they want you to be? I would also make sure that you're looking at, as you're going through that RFP process or request for quoting or whatever, that you understand the criteria of how are you evaluating that organization, right? So, sorry, and I may be jumping ahead here, Susan.
I was like, oh gosh,
yeah.
I was like listening so intently, I was like not looking at the screen.
Yeah, no. I also am like, hey, but I would be talking to them about are they like, how are you going to evaluate those comparable quotes? So if you've got two quotes that are side by side and one says, yeah, we're $10,000, we're going to build you the structure, but you have to write all your own content. You have to input all your own content. You've got to source all your own photos. You need to go do all your own SEO tagging, and that may work for you depending on how your team is set up. It may not, right? Versus this other group over here that says, hey, for, whatever the price is, here's all the things we're going to do. And so I would just really kind of go back and forth with them on like, what's their style and how does that work with yours? I think the other thing that you may want to look at too is, are you looking at an agency that, like, you may have a creative agency on retainer already, or you may have an agency you work with. Do they also do web development, and do you want to continue working with them? Or are you saying, look, we have this really specific lead gen program we want to be running. So we're going to find a lead gen organization, and they've got this really specific niche kind of focus, and that's kind of what's important to us. I would go and have the conversation with them about, is that team that's pitching you, is that the same team that's going to be working on the project? So I remember early on in my career that we had a group come in and they were pitching to us, and like the owner of the agency came in and their senior art director came in and all of these unbelievable people came in and they talked to us, and the team I was working on at the time, my manager was like, oh my gosh, this is the group I want to go with. Like, look at all the other work they're doing, and they're so innovative and they're so creative. And then when it came down to the actual who was working on our project, none of the people that had been in the room pitching to us were people actually working on my project. And I went, okay, so that's awesome, but like, you've now put a junior strategist on it and a junior copywriter on it, and like, I just remember feeling so disappointed because kind of we had been sold this big, beautiful, lovely, wonderful, bold vision, and the delivery of it was completely different than we were expecting going in. So that was a really tricky thing for us.
That is, Lisa, that's the typical bait and switch that agencies will do. And that's a good question to ask, because I want the team who's going to be doing. You can demand that as a client. You can say, I want the team who's working on the account to come and present to me. I don't want the big names and the big wigs. I want the people who are going to be working on the account, because that will let you know if the vibe and the energy is there as well.
Well, and if they've got the experience you want, right? I think it's also fair to look at their previous work, but don't use that as the only metric to judge, right? Because you've got to remember that, like, often what the end result looks like, depending on how collaborative they are with the client, may be driven by the client. So just kind of keep that in mind. I think it's really important that you understand how much work you're going to be doing up front, but also what happens to sustain it. So, there's also this scenario where you go and you get this awesome, amazing website built, and you launch it, and that's great, and then you go to need to make a change, and it's so locked down that to do anything on it, you have to have your agency involved in it. And and is that a good thing or a bad thing? I mean, for me, it's not great, but I think for some people that works fine. But I think you need to figure out what resources you have yourself to to kind of, and how much work you want to be putting into it going forward to sustain it. But I would have a really candid conversation with your vendor on, what does the project timeline look like? What's the deliverables? What's the cost on it? And I think it's okay too to go to a vendor and say, look, here's what my budget is, right? Because there's always that chicken and egg, like, well, how much do you have? I don't want to tell you. What can you do, right? So I think it's important that you have a really candid conversation with them about, look, this is what I want to have delivered, and here's how much money I have. Can you actually do that or not? And if you can't, what gets pulled away? But the most important thing I can say is, call some of their other clients. So, if they're going to hand you a couple of references that are going to be awesome, they always are, right? It's like how when we apply for jobs, we always give our favorite references. I would also, though, call into a company that they may not be on their reference list, but that they did their site, and just ask them what the experience was like. And I wouldn't, and as you're asking those questions, ask them about what it was like when, through the process, and were they open to your feedback, and did things go as per the timeline, and were things as expected from a budgeting perspective, and did they deliver everything they want? And just, know what you're getting into before you go into, into that relationship, because I think that, this is a very important relationship as far as they're presenting your community to the world, right? They're the organization that's showcasing, what your town or your city looks like, and you need to be really comfortable with who you're moving forward with.
And Lisa, I would say from the vendor perspective, your comment about sharing your budget up front, like, yes, please just share your budget up front, because a lot of times it's like, we're spending time to research your community and to, see like what there is and provide recommendations. And then we spend all this time and then we send it and they're like, oh my God, your budget does not fit our budget. And it's like, So I would just encourage you all to just, if you're asking your vendor to be candid and transparent with you, please just do the same. It's kind of like professional courtesy, and just be like, and if they're too expensive, just let them know, and they'll be like, hey, totally fine.
Yeah.
Or they'll say, we really want to work with you. Let's see how we can be creative to do this. So.
Yeah, and that happens all the time. Like, we have times where we've got projects where, the main agency that we work with says, hey, this is how much it would cost us. And we're like, yeah, like, what, our budget totally doesn't allow for that for this particular project. And so sometimes they'll say, oh, okay, well, what if we did this instead to get at that budget? Or there's been other times where they've actually referred us out to other folks, right? Where they're just like, look, we know we can't possibly compete on that, and that's okay. But here's a vendor that we know that probably can, and that they do good work. So, like, I would say don't be afraid to be candid about the pricing.
Yeah. And I think this is your last kind of tip I'm looking for.
This is my last one. Yeah. I mean, the other, like one of the things that my team, we talk about a lot within my team is, we really understand what it is we're doing and why, right? So we have a particular business need we need to achieve. And I think that's really important, that when you're talking to a vendor, that you're really clear on what it is they're doing. But I would let them be a little bit creative on the how are they delivering it, right? Because, and Susan, this has happened when we have worked with CCI, and this has happened when we work with your team. It's happened when we work with our other teams as well, where we're like, hey, we need a campaign that does this, 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 and this. And, and the agency will come back and they'll be like, hey, have you thought about approaching it like this? And you go, oh, I didn't know that we could do, so I think it's okay to be open to new ideas. Your agency is working with all kinds of cool and interesting projects, and like, this is their world that they're in every single day. And so they may come to the table with new ideas and be open to it. And it's, as a client, it's totally fine to say, yeah, no, totally not comfortable with that. But let them kind of show you what's possible.
Yeah. That's awesome. So guys, as we're looking to wrap up here, but I just wanted to say thank you so much for participating in the most important kind of call to action. I don't know why this isn't working for me, but for those of you who don't know, we are looking for the economic development industries 40 under 40. So for those of you who are under 40, or a rising star who are under 40, we're accepting nominations through October 12th, and I'm just and it's at about let's see, www.economicdevelopment40under40.com. You can go nominate a rising star in the industry. Lisa is a former 40 under 40 winner, so that is why that is why she's allowed to be called a marketing badass, for the record. So would love to have some more marketing, economic development, business development badasses in our list. So feel free to call me with any questions. I'm trying to go through the presentation again. I don't know what happened, but thank you guys. You've been super engaged and wonderful. Really appreciate it. Hope you all have a wonderful weekend, and feel free to call Lisa and I or email us. We're here with any questions, and yeah, we'll send you this slide deck again. So again, all of those who are interested, this slide deck's coming your way.
All right. Bye, everyone. Thanks so much.
Bye, friends. See y'all.